My name is Claire Whitmore. I was 30 years old when my father walked into my living room with a loaded gun, pressed it against my 4-year-old daughter's head, and demanded I sign away my future. Before that day, people in town knew my family name before they knew mine. Whitmore Properties, Whitmore Foundation, Whitmore Medical Wing. My father, Robert Whitmore, had spent 40 years building himself into the kind of man newspapers called a visionary and waiters called sir. He owned office towers, shopping centers, waterfront buildings, and enough politicians' smiles to make people believe he was untouchable. Inside our home, he was not a visionary. He was a ruler. My older brother Carter was born first, so he was treated like a prince before he learned to walk. He received cars for birthdays, private tutors when he failed classes, and a vice president title the morning after graduation. Even though everyone in the company knew he could barely read a contract without someone explaining it twice, my younger sister Chloe was different. She was raised like a showroom piece. Perfect hair, perfect laugh, perfect dresses, perfect manners. My mother, Diane, taught her that charm was a weapon and marriage was a business strategy. Chloe listened well. She married Dylan, an investment banker with a last name my parents could show off at charity dinners. And then there was me, Claire, the middle child, the mistake with a pulse. When I was 18, I told my parents I wanted to become a pediatric nurse. My father stared at me across the dining table like I had spat into his wine. A nurse, he said. You want to spend your life taking orders from doctors. I want to help children, I said. Carter laughed into his glass. Chloe looked embarrassed for me. My mother dabbed her mouth with a napkin and said, Claire, sweetheart, women in this family do not clean up other people's messes. But I went anyway. I studied. I worked nights. I learned how to hold a mother's hand when a doctor had no good news. I learned how to smile for a terrified child while my own heart was breaking. I learned that money could buy hospital wings, but it could not buy kindness. That was something my family never forgave me for. When I brought Mason home for Thanksgiving, they hated him before dessert. Mason Blake was an elementary school teacher. Gentle, en passion, the kind of man who crouched to speak to children at eye level. He wore an inexpensive blue sweater and brought my mother flowers. Diane looked him up and down, as if he were an item on clearance. A teacher and a nurse, she said, smiling thinly. How noble. How small. Mason's hand found mine under the table. He did not squeeze from fear. He squeezed because he knew I was trying not to break. My father carved the turkey slowly. Carter closed a $12 million acquisition this week, he said. That is a career. What you do, Claire, is sentiment dressed up as work. I looked at him and said, then I guess I shows sentiment. The silence that followed was colder than anger. After that, I stopped expecting them to understand me. Mason and I built our own life. A modest house, used furniture, grocery lists written on the back of old envelopes, cars that rattled in winter, bills paid on time because we planned every dollar, and we were happy. Not polished, not impressive, happy. When Hazel was born, I made the mistake of believing a baby might soften them. I called my mother from the hospital with Hazel asleep against my chest. Her tiny fingers curled around mine. Mom, I whispered, exhausted and glowing. She's here. There was a pause. Then Diane sighed. Oh, good. Tell Mason congratulations. I'm at the salon. Claire, I'll call later. She did not call later. 3 weeks after Hazel's birth, a plain grocery store card arrived in the mail. Inside was a $20 bill, and one sentence written in my mother's sharp, perfect handwriting. Buy the baby something practical. No visit. No flowers. No softening. But when Chloe had her first son, my father opened a trust fund before the baby left the hospital. Diane practically moved into Chloe's guest room, taking photos with the baby for every brunch. Friend who wanted proof she was a devoted grandmother. Hazel did not exist to them, because I did not exist to them. For a while, that hurt. Then, it became freedom. Mason and I built a wall around our small family. Hazel filled every room with noise and sunlight. She loved dolphins, pancakes, yellow rain boots, and asking questions that had no end. She believed the moon followed our car because it liked her. Mason never corrected her. Neither did I. We had peace for almost 4 years. Then, on a rainy Tuesday evening, my father's black car was parked outside my house. I had just finished a 12-hour shift at the children's hospital. My body ached. My scrubs smelled faintly of antiseptic. A little boy I had cared for all week had finally smiled that afternoon. And I had been carrying that smile like a fragile candle all the way home. Then I saw Robert's car. Mason opened the door before I reached it. His face was pale. "He's in the living room," he whispered. He just walked in. My father sat on our second-hand couch like a king forced to wait in a bus station. A leather briefcase rested beside his polished shoes. He had not removed his coat. "Claire," he said, as if we had spoken yesterday and not years ago. "Sit down." I stayed standing. He opened the briefcase and removed a stack of papers, thick enough to make my stomach tighten. "We're expanding downtown," he said. "Major development. The bank requires immediate family signatures to spread liability. It's a formality." He slid a pen across my coffee table. I picked up the first page. Then the second. "Armeyuen. 3 millions." For a moment, the room seemed to tilt. "Are you insane?" I asked. His jaw hardened. "Watch your tone. I'm a nurse. Mason is a teacher. We have a mortgage and a child. I am not co-signing a multi-million-dollar corporate loan for you." My father leaned forward. And for the first time in my life, I saw something under the arrogance. Fear. Not guilt. Not shame. Fear. "You owe this family," he said quietly. "Every breath you have ever taken happened under my roof." "No," I said. "Everything I have now, I built after leaving it." His hand slammed onto the table so hard, Hazel's framed picture jumped against the wall. "You will sign." Mason stepped beside me. "Robert, you need to leave." My father stood so quickly, the briefcase nearly fell. His eyes moved from Mason to me, then toward the hallway, where Hazel's bedroom door was half open. That look changed something inside me. It was only 1 second, but I saw it. He had found the place where I could be hurt. "You have 24 hours," Robert said. After that, I stopped asking. He walked out, leaving the papers on my table like a threat that had weight. When the door closed, Mason and I stood in silence. Rain tapped against the windows. Somewhere down the hall, Hazel laughed in her sleep. Mason picked up the papers with shaking hands. "Claire," he said, voice low. "Wealthy men don't need nurses to co-sign loans, unless something is very wrong." I looked at my father's signature line, then at mine, and for the first time, I understood that my family had not come back because they wanted me. They had come back because they needed a sacrifice. I barely slept that night. The loan documents stayed on our kitchen table long after Hazel had gone to bed. Every time I walked past them, they seemed heavier, as if they carried something far more dangerous than signatures and numbers. Mason poured 2 cups of coffee and sat across from me. "Claire," he said quietly, "your father didn't ask for help." I looked up. "He gave you a deadline." He was right. Robert Whitmore had never negotiated with anyone in his life. He issued orders. If people obeyed, he rewarded them. If they resisted, he destroyed them. For years, I had been invisible. Now I had become an obstacle. The next morning, I contacted an independent forensic accountant that one of the physicians at the hospital trusted. I paid almost every dollar we had saved for emergencies. "If there's something hidden," I told him, "I need to know." 3 days later, he called. "Can we meet in person?" The tone in his voice answered my question before he spoke another word. The report was worse than I imagined. The downtown development project barely existed. It had been exaggerated to convince investors and lenders that Robert's company was still expanding. The real problem sat beneath years of carefully buried transactions. Millions of dollars had quietly disappeared. At first they looked like investment losses. Then the pattern became impossible to ignore. Private gambling clubs, offshore transfers, cash withdrawals routed through shell companies. The accountant slid another folder toward me. Your father isn't simply losing money? I opened it. He owes someone. The creditor wasn't a bank. It wasn't another corporation. It was a criminal financier named Cameron Ellis, a man whose name had quietly appeared in several ongoing investigations involving extortion, illegal gambling, and violent debt collection. If your father doesn't repay him, the accountant said, the consequences won't be financial. My stomach tightened. And this loan, he folded his hands. It was never meant to finance construction. He paused. It was meant to rescue your father. I stared at the pages. If you signed, your credit would secure the loan. And when everything collapsed, you would legally carry enormous liability. I closed the folder. So, he planned to sacrifice me? The accountant didn't answer. He didn't have to. Driving home felt surreal. Every childhood memory suddenly looked different. The expensive vacations, the charity galas, the magazine interviews, the speeches about discipline and honor, all of it had been built on appearances. Underneath was panic, desperation, and greed. When I told Mason everything, he remained silent for a long moment. Finally, he asked one question. What do we do? We end this. The following morning, my attorney, Veronica Hale, drafted a formal cease and desist letter. No further contact. No visits. No phone calls. No attempts to involve me in Robert Whitmore's financial affairs. Every communication would go through legal counsel. The certified envelope was delivered before noon. War officially began before sunset. The first call came from my mother. I answered only because I didn't recognize the number. You selfish little girl. Diane's voice exploded through the speaker. Your father built your entire life. I built my own life. You owe him. No. You'll regret this. I already regret having parents who think their daughter exists to pay their debts. Silence. Then screaming. I ended the call. Blocked the number. I never heard that voice directly again. 2 days later, they came after my career. I was checking medication for one of my young patients when shouting echoed down the pediatric hallway. Heads turned. Parents stepped out of hospital rooms. Security guards hurried toward the entrance. Then I heard Carter. There she is. He pointed directly at me. My sister steals narcotics. The words echoed through the corridor. Nurses froze. Visitors stared. Several children looked frightened by the shouting. My heart pounded. Not because I believed him, because I knew exactly what he was trying to do. A pediatric nurse, accused of stealing medication, could lose everything before proving her innocence. Hospital Director Julian Mercer stepped from his office. Former military surgeon. Calm. Unshakable. He looked at Carter for less than 5 seconds. My nursing staff undergoes regular testing. Julian said, Claire Whitmore has one of the cleanest records in this hospital. He nodded toward security. Escort this man off the property. Carter struggled. This isn't over. You'll all see what she really is. Julian didn't even raise his voice. If you return, you'll be arrested. Security dragged Carter toward the elevators, while dozens of witnesses watched. The silence afterward felt almost louder than his shouting. Julian turned to me. You okay? I nodded. I will be. Inside. I wasn't sure. That evening I cried in the shower where Hazel couldn't hear me. Not because Carter had embarrassed me, because he had tried to destroy the one thing I loved most, helping children. Mason found me sitting on the bathroom floor afterward. He wrapped a towel around my shoulders without saying anything. Sometimes love isn't advice. Sometimes it's simply staying. The attacks didn't stop. They changed targets. Mason arrived home one afternoon, carrying a thick envelope from the school district. Anonymous complaints. Accusation? Claims that he was emotionally unstable around students. Suggestions that Child Protective Services had investigated him. Every statement was fabricated. Every allegation anonymous. The principal believed Mason. His colleagues believed him. But district policy required an official review. His permanent employment file would now contain allegations that should never have existed. Mason placed the papers on the kitchen counter. They're trying to make us tired. I looked at him. So tired, we'll finally say yes. He nodded. They don't understand us. No. I folded every page carefully. They still think fear works. A week later, I walked into the hospital parking garage. After another exhausting shift, something felt wrong immediately. My car leaned slightly to one side. Then I saw why. All 4 tires had been slashed. Red spray paint stretched across the driver's door. Sign. Or, accidents happen. For several seconds, I couldn't move. The smell of fresh paint filled the garage. Someone had stood exactly where I was standing now. Someone had wanted me to find this. Not the police. Me. I reached into my pocket and called Mason. My voice remained surprisingly calm. I need you to pack a bag. He didn't interrupt. Take Hazel to your parents' house. Claire. Tonight? He heard something in my voice. Something final. I'll leave immediately. After hanging up, I stared at the ruined car. Until that moment, I had believed this was financial intimidation. I was wrong. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about control. And people desperate enough to threaten a child would eventually stop making threats. They would act. I called Veronica. I've made my decision. Good. She answered. I was hoping you would. Restraining order. No. She surprised me. A piece of paper won't stop people this desperate. So what will? There was a long pause. Then she said quietly. We let them believe they're winning. I frowned. What? They already think you're weak. They think you're scared. They think you'll eventually fold. Another pause. So let them come. My heartbeat slowed, and when they do, her voice became almost cold. We make certain they never walk away from what they choose to do. For the first time since Robert had entered my house with those loan papers, I stopped thinking like a frightened daughter, and started thinking like someone preparing for a battle she refused to lose. Veronica arranged the meeting the following afternoon. The office wasn't downtown with polished marble floors and expensive artwork like the firms my father used. It occupied the second floor of a renovated brick building overlooking the harbor. Simple, quiet, professional. Exactly the kind of place people underestimated. After listening to everything from the loan papers to the vandalized car, Veronica folded her hands. They're escalating in predictable stages. I frowned. What do you mean? They started with guilt. When that failed, they attacked your career. When that failed, they attacked Mason. When that failed, they threatened your safety. She leaned forward. The next step is physical coercion. A chill ran through me. They'll come to the house. I think so. And they'll believe they still control the situation. She picked up her phone. I know someone. His name was Aaron Pierce. Former military intelligence. Now the owner of a private security company that specialized in protecting witnesses, executives, and families targeted by organized crime. He arrived carrying 2 plain black equipment cases. Nothing about him looked dramatic. That made him even more intimidating. He walked through every room of our house without saying much. Finally, he looked at me. Your lawyer says you're willing to let them come. I'm tired of running. He nodded once. Good. Running never ends. For the next 2 days, my home quietly transformed. Tiny cameras disappeared inside smoke detectors. Another lens hid inside a bookshelf, facing the living room. Sensitive microphones were installed behind light fixtures. Even the hallway leading toward Hazel's bedroom gained complete video coverage. Aaron explained everything carefully. Nothing records, only locally. If they destroy every camera, the footage is already stored elsewhere. Exactly. Encrypted cloud servers, multiple backups, real-time streaming. There would be no way to erase what happened. Then Aaron handed me something unexpected. A silver necklace. Simple. Elegant. It looked like ordinary jewelry. Camera. I guessed. He smiled. And microphone? I turned it over. No visible lens. There isn't one. He tapped the center. It streams continuously. He then became serious. There's another feature. Panic activation. How? You say one phrase. What phrase? Something you would never normally say. I thought for a moment, then answered, emergency assistance. Aaron typed it into his tablet, the moment those words are spoken in sequence. What happens? My monitoring center immediately confirms the threat. No waiting. No operator asking questions. No delays. He looked directly at me. Armed response will already be moving, before anyone finishes dialing 911? How long? Less than 4 minutes. I wrapped my fingers around the pendant. It suddenly felt much heavier than silver. That evening, Mason watched Aaron's team packing equipment. He looked uneasy. I don't like this. I know. It feels like inviting a storm. I stepped closer. I'm not inviting it. I'm making sure we're alive when it arrives. He closed his eyes. You shouldn't have to do this. No. But I'm done pretending they'll suddenly become decent people. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he pulled me into his arms. I'll do whatever keeps Hazel safe. So will I. Following Aaron's advice, Mason and Hazel temporarily moved to his parents' home, 2 towns away. Explaining it to Hazel broke my heart. Vacation? She asked hopefully. I forced a smile. For a few days. Will Mommy come? Soon. She wrapped both arms around my neck. I'll miss you. I'll miss you more. As Mason loaded their bags into the car, I kissed Hazel's forehead longer than usual. She waved until the car disappeared. Only then did I allow myself to cry. The house had never felt so empty. Over the next week, I became an actress. I returned to work, bought groceries, smiled at neighbors, answered casual questions. Everything looked normal, quietly. I allowed carefully chosen information to spread. An old family acquaintance stopped me outside a pharmacy. How's Mason? Buzzy. He took Hazel to visit his parents for the weekend. The woman smiled politely. News traveled through our town faster than weather. By evening, I had little doubt Diane would hear exactly what I wanted her to hear. Claire is alone. Claire is vulnerable. Claire has no one to protect her. Aaron checked the surveillance every night. Still nothing. The second night, nothing. The fourth, nothing. By the 6th day, I almost convinced myself they had given up. Aaron disagreed. They're waiting. For what? The moment they believe you'll least expect them. Saturday arrived unusually warm. Sunlight spilled through the living room windows. Mason and Hazel had returned that morning because I refused to spend another night away from my daughter. Aaron knew they were back. His monitoring team remained active. Everything stayed online. Hazel sat on the rug, building an elaborate castle from colorful wooden blocks. She concentrated with complete seriousness. Every few minutes, she held up another tiny tower. Mommy, look. It's beautiful. She giggled. I made it taller than me. I smiled despite the knot in my stomach. Children somehow continue believing in ordinary days, even when adults know something terrible is approaching. I envied her. Around 2:15 that afternoon, an engine roared outside. I looked through the curtains. A black SUV? My pulse slowed, instead of quickening. They had come, exactly as Veronica predicted. 4 doors opened, almost simultaneously. Robert climbed out first, carrying his leather briefcase. Diane stepped onto the driveway, balancing a white bakery box. As though she were arriving for a birthday celebration, instead of a confrontation, Carter stretched his shoulders confidently. Chloe adjusted expensive sunglasses before following the others toward the front porch. The performance had already begun. I touched the silver pendant beneath my shirt. Aaron's voice echoed in my memory. Say the phrase only when there is immediate danger. I inhaled once, opened the front door. Robert didn't greet me. He simply brushed past my shoulder and entered my home, as though he still owned it. Diane walked straight into my kitchen without permission. She placed the bakery box on the counter with exaggerated care before looking around in visible disgust. So this is still how you live. Carter positioned himself beside the front door, blocking the exit, exactly where Veronica predicted someone would stand. Chloe smiled brightly before walking directly toward Hazel. Hello, sweetheart. Hazel instinctively stepped backward. She remembered enough about her aunt to feel uncomfortable. Chloe crouched beside her anyway. Aunt Chloe missed you. She rested both hands on Hazel's shoulders. The gesture looked affectionate. It wasn't. Hazel immediately stopped smiling. Across the room, Robert calmly unlocked his briefcase. The thick stack of loan documents landed on my coffee table. His voice was frighteningly composed. This ends today. I already gave you my answer. You gave me the wrong answer. He pushed the papers toward me. Sign. I remained where I stood. I'm not sacrificing my family for your debts. His expression darkened. For a long moment nobody spoke. The silence felt almost heavier than shouting. Then Diane laughed softly from the kitchen. You've always been dramatic. Claire. You never understood how this family works. I looked at each of them. None appeared nervous. None looked uncertain. They honestly believed this would end the same way every other family confrontation had ended, with me surrendering. They had absolutely no idea that every camera inside the house was already streaming, nor did they realize that somewhere across town, Aaron's team was watching every second unfold. The trap was no longer being prepared. It had already closed. Robert rested one hand on the stack of loan papers. His voice was almost gentle. I'm giving you one final opportunity. I met his eyes. And I'm giving you one final answer. No. The room fell silent. Then, his expression changed. The polished businessman disappeared. What stood in front of me wasn't the respected developer the newspapers admired. It was a desperate man, watching decades of lies collapse. You've always been the weak one. Hey, he said, the child who thought kindness mattered. I don't think it matters. I took one slow step forward. I know it does. His jaw tightened. You'll sign. I won't. He reached inside his jacket. Every instinct in my body screamed before my mind understood why. The handgun appeared slowly. Black. Heavy. Very real. Hazel gasped. Mason instinctively stepped toward her. But Carter shoved him backward with enough force to send him crashing into the hallway wall. Stay where you are. Diane folded her arms. Not frightened. Not shocked. Almost impatient. As usual. She sighed. Claire is forcing everyone to waste time. Chloe tightened both hands around Hazel's shoulders. Don't move. Sweetheart. Hazel began crying. I want mommy. My heart broke. Robert walked forward. Each step felt impossibly slow. Then he lowered the barrel until it rested against the side of Hazel's head. Everything inside me stopped. Every sound disappeared. Every thought vanished. Only my daughter's terrified face remained. Please. Hazel whispered. Robert never looked at her. His eyes stayed locked on mine. You sign, or she pays for your stubbornness, Mason shouted. Robert. Don't. Carter grabbed him again. This is your fault. I forced myself to breathe. Panic would kill us. Time. I needed time. I looked directly toward the hidden camera, inside the smoke detector. Then, I touched the pendant beneath my shirt. My voice remained steady. Emergency assistance. Robert frowned. What? I repeated it clearly. Emergency assistance. He sneered. What kind of nonsense are you muttering? He had no idea. Somewhere across town, Aaron's monitoring team had already confirmed the emergency. Vehicles were moving. Sirens remained silent. The countdown had begun. 1 minute, maybe less. I only needed to keep Robert talking. You don't have to do this. I said, I already have. You can still walk away. No. His finger settled against the trigger. You forced this. I didn't force anything. You gambled away your fortune. You chose crime. You chose this. His face twisted with rage. Everything I built belongs to this family. It belonged to your ego. He took another step. The barrel pressed harder against Hazel's temple. Mason struggled against Carter. Claire. Hazel's sobs became frantic. Mommy. I'm here. Sweetheart. I'm right here. She looked directly at me, trusting me, believing I would protect her, no matter what. Robert's voice became frighteningly calm. 5 seconds. You sign. Or I pull the trigger. I stopped counting seconds. There wasn't enough time. There was only one choice. I lunged. Every ounce of strength I had drove me toward Robert. I wasn't trying to save myself. Only Hazel. The gun exploded. The sound was deafening. For one impossible second, everything froze. Plaster rained from the ceiling. Hazel collapsed sideways. My world shattered. Hazel! I dropped beside her, hands shaking violently. I searched for blood. Nothing. She screamed. She was alive. The bullet had struck the ceiling, after Robert instinctively flinched when I hit him. Before he could recover, a deafening crash shook the house. The front door disappeared inward. Black uniforms flooded the living room. Police. Drop the weapon. Red laser sights covered Robert's chest. He froze. The pistol slipped from his hand. It hit the hardwood floor, with a sharp metallic crack. Within seconds, officers forced Robert face first onto the floor. Carter tried to run. 2 officers tackled him before he reached the hallway. Chloe released Hazel and began screaming. Diane attempted to back toward the kitchen. She never made it 3 steps. Steel handcuffs clicked shut around all 4 members of my family. I pulled Hazel into my arms. She clung to me so tightly, I could barely breathe. It's okay. I've got you. I'm here. She cried into my shoulder while I kissed the top of her head over and over. Mason wrapped both of us in his arms. None of us spoke. We didn't need words. Officer Matthew Reynolds approached after the house had been secured. Robert, bleeding from the nose, struggled to sit upright. This is a misunderstanding, he shouted. It's a private family dispute. You need to hear my side. I looked down at him, then slowly lifted the silver pendant hanging around my neck. You already told your side. I pointed toward the smoke detector, then toward the bookshelf, then toward the hallway. Confusion spread across Robert's face. There are cameras, I said. His eyes widened. Every room. Diane stopped struggling. There are microphones. Carter stared upward. The entire assault, I paused, was streamed live. Silence. Absolute silence. Robert slowly turned toward the ceiling. For the first time in my life, I watched my father realize he had completely lost control. The trial began 8 months later. Robert's attorneys attacked the surveillance footage. Veronica dismantled every argument. The recordings were legal. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury watched every minute. Robert threatening his daughter, Diane laughing, Carter assaulting Mason, Chloe restraining a terrified little girl. No witness could explain away what the cameras had captured. Then came another surprise. Dylan, Chloe's husband, took the witness stand. He testified that Chloe had openly discussed forcing me into signing the loan. She had admitted sacrificing Hazel's safety was acceptable if it protected her inheritance. Chloe's defense collapsed instantly. The prosecution wasn't finished. Financial investigators revealed Carter had secretly embezzled millions from the company for years. Even Robert looked stunned. The empire he believed he was protecting had already been hollowed out from within. The jury deliberated less than 4 hours. Every defendant was found guilty. Robert received 23 years. Diane received 18. Carter's sentence expanded after separate financial charges. Chloe accepted a plea agreement and lost custody of her children. The Whitmore empire disappeared piece by piece. Properties were auctioned, businesses liquidated, fortunes erased. 3 years later, Mason, Hazel, and I lived in a quiet coastal town where no one recognized our last name. I still cared for children. Mason still taught them. Hazel had become obsessed with marine biology and insisted every visit to the aquarium ended with the dolphins. The nightmares eventually faded. Her laughter returned. Sometimes letters still arrived from prison. Apologies, excuses, requests. Every envelope went directly into the shredder, unopened. Some relationships cannot be repaired. Some doors should never be opened again. People often ask me whether I regret setting the trap. My answer never changes. I didn't trap my family. I simply gave them the opportunity to reveal exactly who they already were. And once the truth stepped into the light, it built its own prison